Good morning, everyone. My name is Fernando Cabral. I'm the Chief Venture Growth of Djassi Africa. My talk today is less than 1%, and you're going to understand why I'm talking about less than 1%. Djassi Africa, our mission is pretty much to empower African innovation because we believe that innovation can be a tool that we can use to transform the continent, right? Some people use politics, some people use education, some people use health. We use innovation because that's the language that we speak, right? And we believe that this innovation tool can really advance African innovation. But we can't talk about advancing African innovation or transformation without talking about African diaspora, right? All this population that is outside the continent that has resources, that has connections that we need to leverage for this mission that we have on the continent, right? So talk about Djassi Africa. We need to talk about Africa, we need to talk about Europe, we need to talk about the US, we need to talk about the world, right? That's why today's talk is focused on Europe and the work that we're doing here in Europe. So we all know that the European startup ecosystem is booming. We see the news, we see the events, we see the information about, the funding, the unicorn generation. So it's really booming, right? And it's good to see that. And the question is, what's happening? As we can see here, in the last two years, in terms of capital invested, is really booming, is really growing, right? And this is good. Even COVID didn't stop this. And the question is, how can we have a diverse ecosystem in Europe if you don't have all the groups represented and served? That's the big question. I think no. This is fact. A key metric of measuring success of an ecosystem is the level of diversity, equality, and equity, right? And the question is, what's happening with Black founders in Europe? I'm talking about Black founders because these Black founders are the African diaspora that I mentioned before, right? So we need to look at them. And it's clear that in the European ecosystem, Black founders are being excluded from funding opportunities. They lack networks, and they have a lot of barriers to develop their businesses. And we can even see here in this graph quickly. So the yellow one is pretty much white men, right? So that's not a minority. And from that point on, we're all talking about underserved groups, right? From women to Black founders, South Asian, Middle Eastern, and so on and so on. So this graph shows what's happening across all the underserved and then underrepresented groups in Europe, right? So it's key that Black founders are facing these barriers, but it's not only Black founders. Women are fighting this war as well, right? The other minorities are doing the same. Migrants are facing the same challenges, right? So we decided to, so I'm talking about Europe, but now I'm going to deep dive in Portugal because I grew up in Portugal, although I'm based in London, and we decided to look at what's happening in Portugal. So I go to Portugal quite a lot. I've been going to a few events in the ecosystem, but I don't see Black founders, I don't see Black investors, right? And living in London, when I go to the events in London, I see something different, right? Because I see more representation. And the question was, and we launched this question 2 years ago, what's happening with the Portuguese ecosystem? What's happening there, right? So everybody's talking about the Portuguese ecosystem growing, right? Portugal being a global startup hub, which is true. But the question is, how can Portugal and other European countries be a global hub if you don't have diversity? So that was the question. So we decided to understand what's happening with this diversity data in the ecosystem. We didn't find data pretty much, right? Which is not a surprise because more advanced ecosystems have these data because it's a metric of advancement, right? If we don't have these data, you can't have strategies to work this and to push this forward. So we didn't find data in the Portuguese ecosystem, and we decided to do a quick analysis in Djassi Africa. We look at 1,059 founders across different portfolios from different incubators, accelerators, programs, and we just found 0.8% of Black founders. That's why less than 1%, right? 0.8% included in the ecosystem from our data, right? And if we don't have official data, our data is official data because there's no official data in the country, right? That's true. Show me the official data. If you don't show me official data, this is the official data, right? So less than 1%. And we thought, okay, what do we do with this? Our work in Djassi Africa is not to do reports. We are venture builders and we are investors. But we said, look, if we want to work with these black founders in Portugal, we need to answer some of these questions. Who are they? Where are they? What needs do they have, right? How can we support them, right? How can we enable funding opportunities for them? So we had all these open questions, and the question was, where do we start, right? Because we know that the lack of equality and diversity is costing these ecosystems returns, innovation, talent. So this is not a charity conversation, this is an economy conversation. This is about innovation, this is about progress, this is about development, right? So the ecosystems that don't have this diversity, they're losing on these different points here, all right? So we must act now, that was for sure. So we said, look, we need to do something. And where do we start with this, right? There's many ways that we can do this, but we say, look, the first thing we should do is look at the data, right? And we always say, if we own the data, we own the narrative, right? If we don't know the data, if we don't have the statistics, how can we have the right strategies for these groups? So that's exactly what we did. So we launched last month the AFROPRENEURS report, first edition for Portugal, State of Black Founders and Ventures in Portugal. This is just a sample. We said, look, we're going to test the model in Portugal. If it works, we can scale this across Europe, right? And that's exactly what we did. We put together a survey, right? But because we believe, and this is an Impact Shakers, mission as well, we believe in collaboration. We didn't do this on our own. We went to the wider ecosystem. We worked with different players in the ecosystem in Portugal, because once again, this is not a conversation about us versus other groups. It's about us together, building this together, right? So we worked with the ecosystem, and we got 230 responses to our survey, which is good, because we didn't have any benchmark. We didn't know if we would get 50, 30, 10, 100. We got 230, and we think that's a good number to start, having this conversation, right? This is just a few snapshots of the areas that we capture in the report. You have almost 200 pages in the report to read, right? But this is just to show some of the areas that we cover. First, we look at the black founders. Who are these black founders? And we found this data. So this really demystified the question of talent. When people say there's no talent in this group, this graph shows that there's talent in this group, right? The data is proving that. There's another question about pipeline, right? If we talk about supply, we talk about investment flow. Usually people say, investors say, oh, there's no pipeline. I'm here, we have money, but we don't see these black founders. But this proves that there's a pipeline. We need to find different ways to get these underserved and underrepresented groups, right? So many more data here. This is just a summary of the different areas that we cover, even the funding landscape, right? So as you can see, 70% of these founders are planning to fundraise in the next 12 months, but they don't know where to start, right? So we need to work with them, right? This data, once again, is important, not to pinpoint and say, look, there's an issue. It's to say, look, we have this vision. Let's work together. Let's build strategies around this. So this is pretty much the different areas that we look at. And just to summarize the barriers that we found, right? Look, once again, looking at the investment flow. From a demand side, where we have the black founders, we found a lack of capacity in terms of understanding, lack of literacy, I would say, in terms of understanding the startup ecosystem and understanding the investment flow, how these things work. So we found that in that group in terms of demand. From a supply standpoint, we spoke with a lot of investors, and the vision is, once again, there's no pipeline. We have the funds, we hear, but we don't find these black founders, right? And then in the middle, we have what we call enablers, the incubators, accelerators, ecosystem builders, universities, and so on. And the question was, how can we make sure that we have programs that include all these different groups, right? It's not about having the programs, once again, it's about making sure that we have the right programs for every group, right? And we came up with 10 recommendations in the report, just to give you this view. And this is just for the next 12 to 18 months. This is just a starting point, right? There's many other things that we can do, but these are the basics in our perspective. As you can see, we have recommendations for all the groups that are important in this equation. We have the government bodies, ESOs, the incubators, accelerators, universities, and so on. We have the black founders, angel investors, VCs, and so on. So we have 10 recommendations that we truly believe that if we apply these in Portugal in the next 12, 18 months, we can start moving the needle, right? And now let's just focus on this. Remove the black founder lens and just put any other lens here. Women, migrants, any other group. You can apply the same recommendations. So this is a starting point. As you can see, we're not talking here about, We're not talking about involving too much the government. We're talking about the players that are really building this at this initial stage, right? So we came up with these 10 recommendations. So this is just to say that when we talk about these underrepresented and underserved groups in Portugal and Europe, once again, this is just a sample, and we tested in Portugal. We believe we can do this across Europe. We all have a role to play here, right? This is not just about Black investors talking about Black founders, right? It's all of us talking about how we can have more diverse ecosystems, right? And the vision that we have for the future, and we just spoke here about Black founders, but the vision is, once again, underrepresented and underserved groups. Just imagine with me, if we have, and that's exactly why we're here in Impact Shakers today, right? That's the vision. I've been sharing this with Yoncha, right? So Djassi Africa is working Black founders, which is an underrepresented group, right? Yoncha might be working with gender, is an example, right? Mo might be working with migrants. Other people in the room might be working with, disability, LGBTQ, right? The key thing here is if all of us are focusing in the verticals that we know very well, and we come together and support each other, that's how we're gonna have more diverse ecosystems across Europe. So that's really the vision. That's why we're here, right? This is not about saying we only look at Black founders. Our agenda is not only Black founders. Our agenda is diversity. But we believe that Djassi Africa, we understand the Black founder landscape. That's why we focus in there. The other people in this room should focus in other areas, and we come together and work together. Yoncha was part of this report. So when we say, look, now let's focus on Black founders, we work together. The next one might be Mo saying, Fernando, now let's focus on migrants. Let's go together. Let's build that together. Let's focus on gender. Let's go together and build that. So that's really the vision for the future. And we believe that it all starts with data. Once again, owning the data is owning the narrative. And we need to have that data to support everything that we do. Thank you so much.